Sono lietissima essere qui con voi oggi. I'll switch to English for now. I'm delighted to be here, and it's been a real joy to be part of the organization with Rosa and with you, Francesca. A landmark rising 32 meters above Philadelphia's Delaware riverfront was unveiled on October 12, 1992. For the client, the America 500 Corporation and lead architect Robert Venturi, that alone was a victory. Completion by the event, it commemorated the 500th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's first landing, was not a given, as we will find out. Venturi had been the obvious choice as an architect for this project. Italy, history, and communicative symbolism defined his professional identity. A Philadelphia native who practiced in his home city for 50 years, he was also, as we know, Italian-American, like the local leaders who formed America 500. They were proud of the magnificent structure designed by one of their own, a world-renowned architect who won the Pritzker Prize 1 year earlier. By other measures, however, the project was less successful. Apart from one regional design award, it did not impress critics and receives little attention and scholarship. But Venturi's investment was more than professional. The donor names carved in granite on the base, they're very faded, but they include his and Denise Scott Brown's. Venturi worked on this for free. Excited, as he said, to honor Christopher Columbus at the heart of our city, among our national heroes, and to mark the proud heritage of Americans of Italian descent in our city. Philadelphia's Fine Arts Commission, however, objected to an ethnic monument, so it generically honors immigrant ancestors, with Italy only implied by the many inscribed names. It was still controversial. During the late 20th century, Columbus became associated with the negative legacies of colonialism across the Americas, with calls to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. The night before this monument's dedication, protesters splattered red paint on it, despite posted guards. They cleaned most of it off, but there are still specks on the inside. Since then, activists have sought its removal with growing intensity in the last decade. Following the 2020 murder of George Floyd, the text was covered by chalkboards, inviting the public to rewrite its significance. After America 500 sued, it was uncovered in 2021, leaving a tense détente that continues. Even without that context, we perceive a conflicted structure. Clearly an obelisk in form, yet obviously not a granite monolith. Its form is both familiar and uncanny. The design has a cartoonish Technicolor playfulness. Italy and Spain's flags are on opposite sides of a toy-like rotating weather vane that squeaks in the wind. Circles at its base suggest both inverted Mickey Mouse ears and oft-noted phallic associations. It also bursts with erudite historic quotations and dense resonances. These tensions were intentional. Venturi wanted to update the obelisk as a duality that can appear either correct or modern, depending on our perspective. Compared to his iconic mother's house. Venturi's most famous and most deeply personal work. This later project is more controversial and more obscure. It is also his most explicit design essay on Italy, presented as an odd axis mundi. Too uncomfortable to celebrate, but too revealing to ignore. This monument hiding in plain sight offers a compact aperture to complex contradictions in Venturi's legacy. The project grew from an earlier anniversary, the 1976 U.S. bicentennial, when Venturi's Franklin Court and Romualdo Giorgola's Liberty Bell Pavilion were built for Philadelphia's celebrations. Independent narratives had sidelined Italian Americans, so the upcoming Columbus anniversary offered them a way to commemorate an earlier founding father and Italians' primacy, as they would see it in American history. But Philadelphia already had a Columbus statue, installed on Benjamin Franklin Parkway for the centennial of 1876. In 1982, it was moved to the city's Italian neighborhood, South Philadelphia's Marconi Plaza, renamed to honor the inventor and the community in 1937. And by the way, Columbus Day became a national holiday in 1934. But it is quite far, 4.5 kilometers from the city's symbolic colonial-era core. And I point out on this map the location of the Venturi family business, which is literally marginal. You see the historic core in this map of 1832. And so that gives you a sense of the relative distance. In 1985, Venturi proposed his first Columbus monument for Marconi Plaza's southern edge, 2 giant billboards with palazzo facades flanking Broad Street, the corridor to Market Street's Decumanus. This monumental gateway framing a view of City Hall would, as David Zalong noted, symbolically unite South Philadelphia to Center City. They were separate cities until 1854. 3 years later, that was never built. 3 years later, America 500 proposed a monument at Penn's Landing, the city's historic seaport. Venturi studied Genoa's waterfront and lighthouses, but recommended another location, the intersection of Washington and Broad, 3 kilometers north of, along that same urban axis where the billboards were supposed to be. America 500's president, attorney Andrew Farnese, liked how this site would mark an entrance to the Italian community. The district would gain visibility from Center City via an obelisk, a form Venturi called both Italian and American. The American example he cited was the Washington Monument, the World by a French donor for the 1792 tricentennial. An authentic Egyptian one in New York Central Park is among countless others dotting the American landscape. This form is, of course, Italian because ancient Roman emperors dragged the pharaoh's colossal granite skewers across their empire. The greatest concentration was, of course, in Rome, Venturi's favorite city, where early modern popes placed the 13 ancient survivors at urban nodes. We see a few here. He knew this history well from his 1950s Rome Prize Fellowship and many other visits, informing his encyclopedic visual memory. Roman details in his design included the crowning orb seen on the Vatican obelisk. The supporting circles derive from the bronze astragals that inspired spheres, and my favorite, the turtles, in Renaissance. Its cracked surface pattern cites the reassembled fragments of all Roman obelisks except the Vatican, the only one to remain upright into the modern era, and the Montecitorio obelisk shows that very nicely. From the outset, Venturi modernized and complicated a paragon of antiquity, solidity, and simplicity. His first developed design was a trussed metal frame with flat panels. The central drawing calls them a glass skin, hung like billowing sails on a mast, producing that minimalist line he wanted. Intersecting corner cutouts highlight the sharp flatness of canonically volumetric spheres and moldings. In January of 1990, after Washington and Broad's subway stations made engineering impossible and 3 other locations were rejected, the monument returned to Penn's Landing, the last of Venturi's 5 eligible sites. The obelisk was then redesigned as intersecting concrete planes supporting floating granite panels suspended 15 centimeters from bolts, a paradoxical billboard obelisk whose profile was formed by flat layers of heavy materials. 2 plan variations were sent out for construction bids: a 4-sided plus sign, and a tripod. The tripod, more stable, less material, was cheaper. Thus, it became 3-sided, discarding one more inalienable obelisk criterion, a square cross-section to align with the cardinal directions. Actually, as Diane Favreau told me to my delight, there were ancient 3-sided obelisks. They're very obscure ones, they're provincial, but they would have absolutely delighted Venturi. Initially located on Delaware Avenue, which was renamed after Christopher Columbus as part of the project, the paved world map for the plus sign, rotated as an X obelisk, became a compass rose. One tripod arm pointed due west, a needle indicating the voyage's symbolic direction. In mid-1990, fundraising began. After a 9-month pause, Venturi began to worry about completion. While the client remained silent, in September 1991, with only a year left and many approvals to obtain, he initiated an economizing redesign to meet the deadline and an anticipated lower budget. The obelisk was moved to the site's center, shortened by 6 meters, substantially shorter than intended, and the tripod became an equilateral triangle. You see that in plan on the left. A granite-faced concrete base supports an ashlar-patterned stainless steel superstructure, and he revived those same corner details from the first design. After consultation with the steel fabricator, it was further simplified. The vertical joints were aligned at the center and the truss encased, becoming an inner pylon that looked an awful lot like an obelisk in these construction photos. Only after the June 1992 groundbreaking, and the flyer we see on the left shows the earlier taller tripod design, did the critical process of finalizing inscriptions begin. The Fine Arts Commission required review of the text before it would give final approval. Its request to, in some way, acknowledge those already inhabiting the continent before Columbus's landing was not addressed, but other changes were made. The string of adjectives beneath Columbus's name was written by Andrew Farnese after reading Columbus's captain's logs. He had proposed incredible navigator and meticulous mathematician, but these adjectives and all of committed Christian were deleted. charismatic leader, and his very laudatory paragraph survived. Inscriptions were still being finalized 2 months before the anniversary, you could see on this drawing. And in fact, 2 granite panels were recarved after Denise Scott Brown caught a misspelling of forebears. But the monument was done on time. Its lighting dramatized the emptiness of its floating metal boxes, whose insubstantial volumes simultaneously produce and negate a canonically solid form. Philadelphia Inquirer architecture critic Thomas Hine called it more an illuminated sign of an obelisk than the thing itself. To Hine, its design conveyed superficiality and emptiness, finding its inability or unwillingness to be a monument in the old style embodies our contemporary ambivalence toward Columbus himself. Hine also saw it violating the form's assumed urban function. An obelisk should serve as a point in space and perceptually pull people together. An obelisk at Washington and Broad, an emblem of Italian Americans at the heart of the city, would have conspicuously pinned South Philadelphia to Center City. Penn's Landing, though about as close to City Hall, is a marginal urban edge, cut off by an 8-lane interstate and invisible from downtown. It was the last of Venturi's choices because it sits mid-block, not at an intersection of long, straight streets affording visibility from afar. After the 2 memorial parks that bridge that 8-lane freeway, any view is blocked by I.M. Pei's Society Hill Towers, where Venturi and Scott Brown once lived. This is as far as you can see it on axis. This is at the very edge of the park. He knew the site and its limitations very well. Distant views like this one were a consistent design priority. All phases offer whose easily understandable civic symbolism can be, or should be, he hoped, appreciated by all. Now lit externally, as any real obelisk must be, its gestalt, at once recognizable and startling, is most visible along the waterfront, across the river in New Jersey, or driving Las Vegas style on Columbus Avenue or I-95, but just for a second before it dips underground. Up close, the huge monument, that is me for scale, rewards close study, as intended, with eloquently clever contradictory details. Reveals under its base and circles make it seem to levitate. The corners are a Musean tribute to honest veneer, a lip where the steel plate slide over granite is a material, graphic, and chromatic divide through the name Columbus. The obelisk's interior, an oxymoron, is bolted and welded like the World War II battleship USS New Jersey now moored across the river. It also rhymes with the marina's masts, and as originally lit, especially evoked both a lighthouse and a skyscraper. These associations provide contextual logic, but one site detail adds confusion. The triangle rotates a few degrees off the paving compass's cardinal directions. This orientation aligns with Philadelphia's street grid. They're both off by about 7 degrees. Never explained, it silently asserts a connection to the city's historic center. Such gestures reflect Venturi's intense design engagement. Project manager Tim Carney said Venturi loved, how its tight scope allowed him to dig into the details, welcoming any opportunity for greater complexity or playfulness. This pro bono project in his hometown also came at a poignant moment. Venturi's 1991 Pritzker coincided with a contracting practice. A firm of 100 working on the Sainsbury Wing in London and other big projects in 1988 had shrunk to 30 by 1992, when the Columbus Monument was dedicated. The obelisk marks a pivot from Venturi's most celebrated decades of practice to a more marginal position for the office's ideographic work, and we'll hear more about that in a little while. Yet the project channeled their still iconic ideas. It grabs the eye like the flashing idea for a monument and makes an obelisk a decorated shed. Pragmatic and semiotic, the relationship between built form and signage is both direct and ambiguous, like the diagram B. But the overall form is also a communicative sign, making it very much a duck. The facade-like granite panels could be replaced, although the historic dates, Christopher, and the top quarter of Columbus are indelibly integral to the steel superstructure. It is a difficult whole that would be very difficult to rewrite. Another difficulty is Venturi's persistent theoretical priority, irony. The communication of opposing messages by tone. The obelisk's formal contradictions, solid, void, ancient, modern, heavy, light, are poetically ironic. But do its compositional ironies extend to cultural politics, entwined with the monument's story through its contentious public legacy? Venturi struck honored from Farnese's honored hero of history when editing its inscriptions. That stayed. But he likely realized that a third, more prominent Columbus tribute in his home city would generate local resentment, not only because the explorer had become an anti-colonial target. In 1992, Philadelphians had yet to allow the erection of Black Philadelphians' first monument to a community icon. It took them 120 years of effort for this statue to be erected in 2017. Venturi's form also had ties to civil rights. Barnett Newman's broken obelisk was shown in Washington, D.C. in 1968 amidst national protests generating controversy. This version was dedicated to Martin Luther King after his assassination. Venturi knew his city's racial conflicts and the art world well. The relevant question is whether he intended the ironies of his monument, whose cheerful, whimsical tone contrasts with Newman's somberness, to simultaneously speak against in any way its stated purpose. We may project current sensibilities onto Venturi retrospectively, reading the strike-through in Columbus as a sly critique, for instance, but the evidence suggests otherwise. VSBA used this graphic device elsewhere without seditious overtones. Venturi was committed to the monument's completion and showed undiminished enthusiasm in June 1992. When he added, "We are thrilled to be working on this fascinating and unusual project," to a press release. He was proud of his Italian identity, but it was non-straightforward. His family left the old neighborhood for a wealthy suburb, becoming Quakers instead of Catholics. And Venturi forged his own transatlantic identity, selectively blending old and new, high and low. He also hoped that his irony-imbued obelisk, a transatlantic tribute, would stand the test of time. Stand it does, despite it all. Still a point of pride for vigilant sponsors, a source of ire for critics, an object of curiosity for others driving, sailing, or strolling past. I consider it worthy of close reading, like all of Venturi and Scott Brown's work, because it looks easy at first, but grappling with its complexities is very difficult. A 5-meter triangular footprint distills great depths into a compact, complex form. It is an uncomfortable emblem of a controversial cause, expressed irreverently, not impertinently, holding irony and sincerity and maybe a touch of agony and suspension. As many of Venturi and Scott Brown's works are increasingly threatened by erasure or transformation, supposedly a core virtue of the decorated shed, perhaps the greatest irony would be if the raw power of concrete, steel, stone, and political deadlock keeps this obelisk upright, however its history is rewritten. Thank you.